sorry. Finish right there. Ed, can you hear me okay? How's it going? Anyone want to share that in the chat? How's the sound? Are folks able to hear me?
All right, I see you.
Cool. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. I can't hear anything. Anyone else? Yes. Yes.
All right.
I love it. Cool.
All right. So good. We met earlier to work out all of the details. So I see, Jay, you don't hear us. Maybe you want to just check your settings to make sure that you're receiving the audio and that you don't have us muted for some reason. All right, well, I'm happy to welcome everyone to our second try of the project-based learning in the French classroom. Again, my name is Ed Smith, and I am a French teacher at Joel Barlow High School, which is located in Reading, Connecticut. And so I'm here with my colleague, Evan Downey, who teaches at St. Luke's School. So I'm going to let him go ahead and sort of do a little introduction for himself, and then we'll kind of get started.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you all for coming back. For those who came back, so sorry about last time. Of course, Ed and I went through and practiced the whole thing, and naturally it didn't work out exactly as we had hoped. So my sincere apologies. It was super embarrassing, but I'm glad that it worked out, and we're ready to go this time. So project-based learning is something that's new to me. It's something that I've been trying to do more of in my classroom. And it's something that I'm super interested in. And I don't claim to be an expert, but I've done a lot of thinking about it and done a lot of work to kind of develop myself with it professionally. So I'm hoping that there's plenty of stuff that I can share with you all today that will be helpful for you all as you think about what project-based learning is and maybe try to implement it a bit in your classrooms. Cool. All right, so everyone's got my screen, right, Ed?
I can see it, yeah, so it looks like it should be projecting.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm just going to shut down the little chat box. Okay, great. So I'm going to start just by asking us to reflect a little bit on some questions I think that allow us to frame the work that goes on in our classroom. I think this is a good place to start because project-based learning is not so much a pedagogy as much as it's just an approach and a philosophy, I guess. And I think it's important when you're developing the culture of your classroom to really reflect on what you'd like it to look like. So when I started thinking about project-based learning, I was thinking about these questions to begin with. What does my classroom look like? What is the best possible version of it? What are my students doing? What are you doing? What are my learning objectives? What are my learning objectives for my students and for what are their learning objectives for themselves? These are all, I think, really essential questions to think about whenever you're trying to design a classroom experience. So for me, my answers to some of these questions were that my students were just immersed in French. They're collaborating. They're putting our community mission first, which is that they're engaged in each other's learning. I don't want kids to come to my classroom and simply just be pigs at the trough or just is everybody losing me on the mic, or is it just some people? How's the sounding aid?
So the bubble with the mic is what allows you to speak. So yeah, it is a little choppy on our end to hear you, Evan. So I don't know if it's because you're through the Bluetooth connection.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I can change it. I'm sorry that it's crackly. But I hope it's okay. I apologize for that. I just don't want it to have feedback into the rest of the presentation like it did last time. That was not good.
Yeah, just maybe if you speak a little slower, that way, you know, the chop won't be as noticeable.
Okay, sounds good. Uh, so basically, I want to figure out how I can put my students at the center of their learning as much as possible. And I think approaching learning through projects is one way to do that effectively. So what I'm looking to be doing in my classroom is to be circulating, asking pointed questions that direct their inquiry, as opposed to standing at the front of the classroom and simply explaining a concept to them. That's part of project-based learning as well. You may have to do the good old-fashioned, didactic lesson, but it's also essential that kids really be at the center of the learning as well, and that's part of the thinking. The other question that I ask myself is, what are the obstacles that prevent this? What are the things that kind of get in the way? Part of that is a lack of fluency, obviously. I teach mostly 9th to 10th graders in French. They don't have all the tools they need to communicate every idea, every thought that enters their mind. Another thing that's challenging is there's, some kids have more passion for the language than others, right? So you have varying degrees of passion for French. Another one is that they have varying degrees of passion for a classroom experience that's really about helping each other and engaging in each other's learning. Really try to cultivate very strongly, and you'll see this in some of the rubrics and project design, a sense of commitment to each other's learning. That's super important to doing this work well. And a lot of what we're going for with project-based learning is, of course, deeper learning, but also to help kids rehearse the soft skills that are going to make them effective in any collaborative work that they do after high school, college, and at business as well. So I really think that there are a lot of elements to this that are practical beyond just learning French. So I think in terms of disrupting the kinds of things that make this challenging, the obstacles, what can you do about that? One of the things you can do about it is make sure that in your assessment, when you're writing rubrics, that you really make sure that you are valuing the things that are important to your class mission, the things that are important to your school, and you have to design the language of the rubric around that kind of thing to make sure that they are committed to the right kind of behaviors that you want to see in your classroom environment. And having them reinforce those things and with deep reflection as well at regular intervals is really important. And you'll kind of see that as I go through. But making sure that they're thinking about the right things is super important when you're designing projects. So the question then is, why PBL? Why is PBL a good approach to learning? It's really, PBL does very, very well. Gold standard PBL, as I would call it, is more than just cool projects. It's really about high quality lesson planning. It's about design. It's problem based. It's student centered. It's student driven. It's mission centric for what we do at SLS. It's really an opportunity for kids to run the show. They really need to rehearse the habits of autonomy in order to be actually autonomous. We're trying to help kids get to that place, right, where they're moving from being children to adults. And creating a project experience in class is really about having them do the work as much as possible. And it's very challenging, I think, as a teacher to kind of let go of that baton sometimes. But it's really, it can be scary, but it's also something that is really powerful. The things that we talk about at St. Luke's are making sure that we are creating classroom experiences that are tied to our mission. We have certain things that we really push in our curriculum. We have certain goals that are important to what we do. So our mission is about love of learning, good character, and the pursuit of excellence. We talk about those kinds of things in our classroom, and it's an important part of design. And the last thing I'll mention before I really get into more of the nitty-gritty is you design something really effectively, like a good project, and you kind of take into account the elements that I'm going to talk about. Kids are going to be intrinsically motivated. And according to Dan Pink, who's a thinker, I think, is pretty powerful in his writing. He talks about intrinsic motivation. He talks about the idea of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. That incentivizes good work. And so when you're building a project and when you do project-based learning well, the kids are working autonomously, they're directing their own work, they're working to master a particular concept or a particular thing, and it's purposeful. There's some sort of product that they're going to create that is going to have real purpose. That's PBL done at the highest level. So what is PBL? I think a better question than what is project-based learning is how is PBL? The reason I say that is because it's not really about it doesn't flow syllogistically, like if you do A, B, and C, that project-based learning. There are best practices. There are things that are, if you include those things and really think about them deeply and create a project around them, that you're going to see something that is really high quality project-based learning. But there isn't like a specific approach. It's really about the kinds of things that you try to build into your project. So these are the things that are super important. First of all, I want to direct you to the Buck Institute for Education. The Buck Institute for Education does a deep dive into project-based learning. If you're new to project-based learning, go there, check out their website. There's so much there, so many tools. Some of the stuff that Ed's going to share with everybody at the end of the presentation will direct you to the Buck Institute. But it is a wonderful organization and a wonderful place to go for tools that will help you design good projects. The first thing is you want to make sure that whatever your project is centered is design is centered around is a complex question, problem, or challenge. If you don't have a complex problem, question, or challenge, you're not going to have enough for the kids to really to have that sort of motivation that's going to keep them working towards a mastery. That's really important. So it's not the kind of thing that you can do for every single assignment that you're going to do in your classroom, but it's something that might work better for diving deeply into a particular culture. Or if you have something, for instance, I'll give you an example. Here we had in Connecticut, we just did recently a sort of like an adult field trip to the Hillstead Museum, which has a wonderful collection of impressionist artwork. And so a good example of something would be like, okay, how can our school engage with the Hillstead Museum to create some sort of project that they could use on tours? If it were an audio tour that was student created, or if they wanted to redesign a brochure for their and we could do that in French. If you do something that has a public purpose like that, the real world context that has the kids an opportunity to kind of dive into something that's authentic like that, those are really going to get, that could be intrinsically motivating, particularly if they're dealing with people in the real world who are going to use this tool. It might be useful for them. Then they're doing it for someone else, and it's not just, oh, I'm going to get the B plus or A minus or A that I'm looking for. That makes it more meaningful. So if you can think in that way, in this sort of backwards design way of what is a need that exists, that's really important. Here are some of the things that gold standard projects include. This comes right from the Buck Institute. They start with, in the center, you see the key understanding and success skills. Those are the things that you want kids to be able to take away from the project. So that's sort of the thing that the kids are going to leave with. But you can see everything that flows into that are these other essential elements. So you start with the idea of having critique and revision, right? That's the kind of thing where kids are really building a growth mindset, where they're developing a skill, where they're mastering something. And that's intrinsically motivating. Right? Reflection, that gives something meaning for the kids. Thinking about the work, that sort of metacognitive process is so important to imbuing the work with meaning, and also just growing as learners. Student voice and choices, you really have a sense of autonomy in there. It's something they're doing for themselves. It gives them the desire to do good work. Authenticity is really about doing something that's connected to a real world experience, which is also intrinsically motivating. Sustained inquiry is about having a meaty enough question that kids can kind of dig into it and think about it and be motivated by the question. They're not going to be able to find an answer right away. There may not be an answer, but in the trying, that can be super interesting for kids. And the challenging form of questions is tied to the sustained inquiry. So all these things flow into a really good project. Now, I'll be honest with you, it's very challenging to do a project that includes all of these things. That can be kind of intimidating. But really when you're starting out doing PBL, collect as many as you can and just keep building. I mean, you have to really think about this as something that you can do and build towards, because it's very challenging to do this very, very well. And you have to keep learning yourself and doing it and be brave. So here's some questions that are really questions that are about making better projects. Talked a little bit about these, but these are the kinds of things that might shape the way that you design the experience in your classroom. What is the problem with authentic francophone cultures? What does inquiry look like in our discipline and for my class's age group? Because you have to have something that's going to be pertinent to what kids do at, say in 7th grade French as opposed to junior year French or senior year French. The idea that they, I moved ahead there a little bit. What did I do? There we go. The idea that they can do the same thing obviously is absurd. How do you create spaces for kids to reflect? What do you do to let kids step back and think about what they're doing in the project? I think sometimes we get so engaged in the idea of finishing something that it's hard for kids to get the most out of it because they're not thinking about what they're doing or what their commitment looks like. You could have as part of your homework, most of the time when I do projects, a lot of the work is done in class, and the homework could be reflection. It could be a very short assignment, but giving them that opportunity to think about what they're doing, what their contribution was, how meaningful it was, how meaningful it wasn't, that's really important and powerful because it really helps kids think about their commitment to the group. It helps them be growth-minded and challenges them to be their selves. Let's see. What does it look like? What does the output look like for the project? Sometimes you might give something where you say, okay, this is going to end up being a video that we show to a particular group. Or it might be something as you find a way to do X, Y, or Z to respond to this question. And that leaves it much more open for the teacher. It can be challenging to think about that way, but it also is something that gives the kids a lot of student voice and choice. So that's something that you want to think about as well. It's one of the challenges for teachers in doing this is letting go, and it is a little bit scary, but it's also something that can be really powerful for the kids. What does assessment look like? Generally speaking, with project-based learning, a lot of the assessment is about writing really carefully constructed rubrics, things that you can tie back to the culture you want to see in terms of the work that kids are doing in your classroom. You want to think about obviously the things that you're trying to assess, the particular skills. You want to really as pointed as possible in your language to help them, do the particular behaviors that you're looking for, but you also want to have something that's meaty. So when I design a rubric, there are a lot of soft skills that I'm building into there because I want to create a culture where kids are working together and not turning to me for an answer, but are committed to each other's learning. Let's see. And the other stuff I think I've touched on a bit. What does collaboration look like? And what are the key skills that you're hoping kids practice? And that's really about what the project design looks like. Authenticity is really important because you always get that question. Kids always ask, what is this for, right? And if you design something that's really authentic, that's really going to have a touch point in the real world, that's really powerful. And that question is answered ahead of time. So that's really important. And there's some thoughts on that. Context is important. How does it connect to the real world? What are the action steps, the processes of the project that are going to be that touch point to the real world? what's the impact, and what's the personal connection. So if you're looking for, I mean, two obvious ways to do a project for French with that are to connect with a Francophone community in your area, or potentially the easy way to do that if you don't have one, but most people do, we don't know it, is to work with another class. Perhaps you're designing something for a younger French class, or you're designing a tool that you can use in class to teach a concept, a game that might help kids learn the passé composé, or a storybook you can read to, really young students. Something that's going to have where they're designing for someone else with that person in mind or that group in mind is really powerful. We touched on this a bit, so I'm going to skip ahead. I don't want to go too long with a lot of this. Sustained inquiry. Sustained inquiry is really important because it fuels that mastery that drives kids. So you want to have a question that is going to really be meaty enough to drive the whole project. And that's something that's one way to make sure that kids are engaged by it. Let's see. One of the things, this is one of the hardest things I would say to do in project design. My recommendation to you would be to take a look at some of the tools that we're going to share with you that allow you to try to ask the right questions or to create a question that will drive kids, help kids to really, think deeply about a concept. There are a lot of rubric tools for project design on the BIE.org website. I'll share that with you. They have a rubric for designing projects, the essential attributes that you want to include. They also have their rubric, which is helpful for asking pointed questions. You can look up that on the website. It's pretty helpful. The other thing I would say, and the thing that we often do not do, that we really ought to, we as teachers, is, and I'm totally guilty of this. In fact, the project I'm going to show you, I did not collaborate on, but that we have to collaborate. We have to work with other people to really kick these ideas around. It's so helpful to talk with other people. So if there are other people at your school who are interested in project-based learning, regardless of whether they teach French, and you have, time where you can get together, chat about it. Talk about like where the sticky points are, what you can do to unstick them. It's so helpful if you can do that. You really, I challenge you to do that if you're interested in doing this. And then the other thing I'd have you keep in mind is when you're talking about working with experts, right? Helping kids talk to experts. Experts is, it could be the Francophone community that you want to connect with, or it could be, for example, I gave the example of the Hillstead Museum before, but experts could also be younger kids who are interested in French but don't have the level, and you want to create something, a game, but they have to have a touch point with a real world group. And that's something that can really drive the passion for a project. Reflection is probably the most, for me, I think it is really the most important part of the project. More important than that final project is what they think about when they look back on the work that they did. Because that's really where a lot of the growth is, and it also is going to fuel your work going forward in the class. And how they think about and feel about their work is really important because, again, it's about developing that growth mindset and keeping them engaged and keeping them thinking about how they can improve, how they can be effective learners. So having really carefully crafted reflecting questions that tie back to the culture you want to see, and I'll show you some examples of this in the rubrics in a little bit, is really important. How they did with those particular things is super important because it's, when you have that sense of what your learning experience looks like, what your goals are for them, what their goals are for themselves, and that's kind of pushed into the reflection process, that's where they're really going to get a lot out of this. The public project is really also a tremendous motivator. If you can create something that is shared with a community group, whether it's that Francophone culture that you're looking to connect with, or it's the little kids in the younger class, or the Hillstead Museum, putting that out there, it is intrinsically motivating because it changes the way the kids think about projects. they're not doing it to share with, you know, Mr. Downey for a grade, but rather they're doing it so this they're solving a problem that the Hillstead Museum has for their, you know, their tour or the new brochure, or, you know, they're looking to develop a relationship with the francophone community, or helping little kids learn passé composé, or whatever it is. That connection really is a great motivator, and a good grade will grow organically from that if the connection is authentic. So in terms of design tools and tips, BIE.org, they have a design rubric that I can give you a quick peek at. I think I've got it over here. So this is where they kind of have the pieces of the little spiral thing that I showed you before, the key, and it helps you kind of work through the idea of what you're looking to stick into your project. Definitely take a look at this stuff. It has a lot of helpful ways of thinking about designing the various pieces of the experience that will help you get a quality project experience for kids. Definitely take a look at their website. BIE.org, there's a tab at the top for resources that will help you see. Oops, what's happening with the computer? It's not good. Go away. That will help you see a lot of other tools that they have on there, including rubrics for assessment, which can be really helpful. They have a great collection of those. I shared some of my own in here, and I'll show you those briefly. And the last thing I'll say about places to go for help with design is go to Twitter. Check out the hashtag FLE, and also PBL. There are things on there that you can find that are going to allow you to connect with people who've been thinking about this sort of thing. So here's the project I did, and you can kind of critique it actually going through. This is something I tried before. It was a first attempt. I would say there are elements of it that were really, I liked elements of it that I thought were not great examples of PBL. It's a mix, but we can maybe assess it a little bit. Basically, what I was asking my kids to do was to create a television commercial. I created that all members of a company where they were wedding planners, and they had to create a wedding planning company that they were going to sell to celebrities for the wedding. Okay, so not a real world tie, but it was something that was fun and kind of pertinent enough to their lives that I think they enjoyed it. They had a lot of fun with it, I'll be honest. They did some really good work, but it didn't necessarily tie into all of the things that gave it the same kind of meaning that I would hope. So next time when I do a project, I really want to start to think about what I can do better to start with a more challenging question than I did. When I first did this, I didn't start with that backwards design. I didn't start with something that was sort of like a sticky question. And I think as a result, it didn't quite have the same kind of meaning for them. But it was fun. They did enjoy it. I think they did learn a lot. So then what they did was they created a commercial for their group. I had a pretty strict program to start. I was still kind of experimenting with this. And it was something that I give them, certain points to hit throughout the week. We did this for, we spent 2.5 weeks on it all together in class. Had a bunch of revision, had a bunch of sort of writing steps involved. They had to write first a draft on Google Docs and share it with me, and they did this collaboratively. And I went through, I reviewed it, I gave them feedback on it, and I gave them an initial grade. And here's a root, and I included this in the folder here. Here's a in-class writing rubric. When I do work with my level 2 and level 3 kids, a lot of the writing I have them do is collaborative. So they'll write a section perhaps on their own, which they did for the most part in this, and then I'll give them feedback on it, and then they have to go back and they have to correct each other's as a group. So they're not allowed to go and just fix something, but they have to go and actually explain the concept to each other. So it's an idea of sort of iterative teaching. Kids who get it, they're able to explain it, and which reinforces their learning. Kids who don't, they learn from their peers. So I'll give them feedback. Okay, I have a whole bunch of little annotations I'll put into something for why it's incorrect. and they have to go back and think about it. But the nice thing of using Google Docs is that you have that live, so you can give them that feedback immediately, and they can go and correct it. A lot of the language that I kind of put in here, if you go from the left to right, it really focuses on the idea of being responsive and responsible for each other, right? So if you make a mistake with that, what do you do to make sure that you're correcting it? So that first thing of, are you actually going back and doing the work of correcting it? Some kids will just kind of skip over something and not correct it, so they're not going to get the same grade. But another part of it too is this idea of, are they stretching their fringe? Are they doing something that's, you know, creative? Are they thinking, you know, beyond what they normally would, you know, the basics? Are they stretching and using more rich vocabulary? Are they doing things that are do an idiom of the day every single day in my class? Are they using those? Finding ways to make sure they're incorporating things and helping kids understand the why behind the mistakes. Super important when they're committed to each other's learning in that way as well. And then you can kind of see it kind of goes down. But what I'm looking for is really reinforcing some of the behaviors of collaboration. Helping their members understand the why behind mistakes is absolutely essential. Another thing that I had them do in this is their video, some of them did shoot some video, but I actually had them do a voiceover for it. Rather than trying to shoot it live and having kind of wonky sound, I had them record just an audio track for a particular section of it. And I assessed that individually. Went through, I gave them feedback. I did an initial group. We have an oral production rubric that we use in class that kind of incorporates the things that we'd like them to have in any oral work that they do. There's a content element, a fluency element, the flow of their speech, the grammar, and also pronunciation. And they're sort of weighted based on what we feel are the most important things. So we put that in there, and I give them an initial grade, and it's a smaller percentage of the overall grade, and then I have them redo it. And they do that. They correct their pronunciation. They focus on cleaning up some of the grammar and the grammatical mistakes. And that was another step in the project. And then finally, they came back and they designed the video, and I had a little rubric that I created for that as well that was focused on the editing, the way that they filmed it, and things like that, to make sure that they included all of the following things, and we're looking at high quality work, pretty good work, and less high quality work. And so having them focused on creating a quality product by focusing on some of the details of video. I used to teach film as well, so I do a little bit of that in teaching kids how to make something look nice in class. If you're not, a film person, then, you can design something a different way. But I would, I think kids like making videos. It's kind of a 21st century skill. So I think it's a fun thing for them and a good way to approach something. It also is the project, the product comes out and we can have like a movie night, or you can have like, you can put, if you have like a school, newscast or something like that. Some schools have that. You could put it on that. You could play it at town meeting. There are ways to make it a bit more public that make it more fun for the kids and gives us a little sense of, meaning to it, where they have to do something good so it comes out well. Let's see. Another thing to think about too, we have really, when we do project-based learning at St. Luke's, we think a lot about what our community goals for learning are. These are they over here on the left. So we actually designed a rubric around that as well. And so these are things that you could build into what you're looking for in terms of the in-class behavior, helping kids think about learning in a way that meshes with the goals of your school. If you have a mission, or if you have certain standards of the way you approach learning in your classroom, it's a really good way to help kids to reinforce the behaviors that you're looking for. Let's see. So I also would just show you, I'll show you a piece of a sample video for one of the kids. We did this actually with green screen. I don't know if this is going to be, can you hear this? Does it play? shoot. Oh, that's such a bummer. Well, I'm sorry that you can't hear it. I feel terrible. I didn't think about that. There's not one on YouTube, but I did share it with you in the folder, so you can take a look at it anytime. I'll just kind of go through it a little bit, and you guys can see it. So the kid shot this in front of a green screen, which is a fun way to do if you're looking for something that's kind of authentic and you want to put them inside like a celebrity wedding or something like that. You can find ways to have them like into the space. It's kind of fun. You really see some silly things. Like I think at one point they put themselves inside Kanye West's wedding or something. And it's really silly, but the kid had a lot of fun with it. So it's another way to create something where you can put a kid in. If you can't go to the actual physical space of that, you can kind of fictitiously recreate the authentic product by making it, with a green screen. That can be fun too. So let's see. I think that is most of what I wanted to talk about. Let me just check here. Where are we? Here's just tips, some, I guess, called pro tips of things that I've tried and thought about, and things I know will or will not work. Some of these things that you can avoid or you can think about beforehand and avoid some of the pitfalls. So the different ways to think about making group selections. If you're doing a project, based learning, you're obviously going to have groups. It's the kind of thing that's collaborative, and that's what's also really fun about it. It's also challenging. You have to come up with ways to get kids to work well together. You can go random, you can do student selected, you can do teacher selected. It's really about what you'd want to do. Personally, I did teacher selected to start. Did this project really early in the year, and it was something that I would have liked to have, just get to know the kids a little bit better before I kind of put them in, let them choose their own groups. Group size is important. You want it to be big enough for everyone to have a role, but small enough for really good teamwork. So you want to think about that a little bit. Keeping kids accountable by having either contracts that you have them design for themselves or work logs where they talk about what they've been up to. Color code them. It's really helpful for your own organization. Let's see. Make sure when you're designing reflection tools that you want to help kids think about their contributions to a group. It's really common for kids to start to think about, what Tommy didn't do, but like, okay, what did you do? All right, what can you do to if Tommy's not doing his work? What can you do to make sure that you're letting him know that without starting a fight? How can you help them be growth oriented? So when you're doing that with your reflection tool, have them think about what they're doing, what the role is in the collaboration. Let's see. Other things to keep in mind. When you're doing it, it can be can kind of weigh on them because it can be like a big thing. Another thing that's important is kind of helping kids break it down, engaging with them about how they might tackle their problem. You want to consider what other commitments they have in their classes, other classes beyond yours, so they feel that they have the time to do the work. You might actually need to explain the concept, little mini lessons. It's really difficult to just say, okay, here you go, and then if they don't know how to approach it, trying to think ahead to the things that they might need to know in order to do the project is really important. So you might have to do little mini lessons for the kids. Project-based learning is not just one thing, it's a bunch of different things. So you might have to consider that. How long do you want the project to go for? Check-ins, how big? Is it a multi-day? Is it multi-step? Let's see. And this is really important. I'd say these last two. Make sure that you considering what the content is. Not everything is going to lend itself to PBL. Some things might work and some things might not work. I'm not saying by any means that everything you do in your classroom is PBL, but it's really interesting and fun to challenge yourself to try to reshape some of your lessons in ways that might help kids go a little bit deeper with something by having them drive the attention. And the last thing is, this is really important. Make sure that you allow yourself room for failure, yours and theirs. I think when I look at the project I just show you, it was only okay in terms of student choice. They didn't, they had a lot of choice over, they had a lot of creative control over what they did, but they, I didn't give them a lot of choice of how to do it. The public product, I did have it kind of presented to other students, but it didn't have the same sort of real world sense that I would have liked. It was pretty weak in terms of a challenging problem or question. I think that I would go back and try to look at something that was a little more broader and community oriented that would kind of motivate them to do something. They were very motivated, but that's really more about them than about what I did. I'll be honest about that. And I do think one thing that was really effective in the project was critique and revision. I thought that the way that I designed rubrics really helped kids understand what good work looked like. And I was really pleased with how they thought about their work and their contributions to the project. I think that's a good takeaway. But it's something that's new for me too, and I want to, really dig in deeper if I can. So I'm definitely going to learn and grow from the one that I did earlier this year. So that is pretty much the end of my part of the presentation. I will hang out for as long as people want to ask questions. I just want to say so much thanks to Ed for organizing this, for your organization savviness, and also to John Gold of Moses Brown School. He presented at St. Luke's in the summer of 2016, and a lot of the content of this and the way I start to think about this is really huge to him. So thank you, John Gold. I'll send him an email to thank him.
All right, great. Thanks, Evan. That was a lot of great tips that I got there that I am going to try to put into my classes as well. So I'd like to open it up now to anyone that's still here. If you have any questions that you want to put through the chat, we would be more than happy to use those and answer those questions. And so, Evan, I wanted to ask you particularly about that, letting go. That's always a big fear for the teacher. And, what if the kid is not doing what I want them to do, and then they're off task? I mean, it's a little worrisome. So I liked your rubric. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So in terms of the rubric, I think, what I did for this particular one was very structured. I mean, if you look at the way that what I expected them to do each day, it was pretty clear what they were supposed to be working on. So the first day of class, I presented the project, and they were kind of working on a brainstorming session. They were starting their Google Doc script, and they had certain things. Having that kind of structure is helpful. I would say if you're starting with a first project, it's helpful to be really structured at the beginning, and maybe if it's something you plan to do multiple times, kind of start to loosen the reins a little bit, because you're trying to set up that culture. I think having clear expectations of what they're supposed to be accomplishing is really helpful. And then in terms of like what the work looks like, making sure that for me, I was really trying to focus on the language in here in terms of we need to explain to each other why something is wrong. You can't just go and correct, that past participle agreement. You have to explain why. And so I think that kind of thing around designing the rubric is really, really helpful to think about.
Right.
Does that answer your question? Or do you have?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think I like the idea of having those clear expectations, and I think that relates really well to the question we have here about, full immersion for those classrooms where the teacher really insists on that French all the time. How do you do that with your classroom, keeping them in the language all the time when your back is turned and there they are, they're in English. So I think that's one of the things that I try to do all the time is really set out those expectations, be very clear. And I keep, whether I give it a grade or not, but I keep track of their behaviors. And then I share that with them as well afterwards. And I'll say, look, here's how you scored today. If this was a grade, this is what you'd get. And it takes time. It really is something that is a culture that you have to develop, I think.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. We have 100% English in our classes in the upper school. We're 5 through 9 here. We start French in 6th grade, and kids continue through senior year. in the upper school, we're 100% French all the time. And it is challenging, but again, it is really about the culture and insisting. And sometimes it's frustrating to be like, French cop. You have to insist on that. And I think that the idea of explaining to them why you do that is really important, because they start to understand. We got an email this year from a girl who was a moderately engaged French student while she's here. Pretty like she did study her senior year. Did a decent job in French, and so a little bit of a snarky kid when she was in class, would kind of push you on that. She got to college, first day of class, she shows up, and the teacher starts speaking in French, the professor starts speaking only in French, and everyone is just like, oh my God, this is terrifying. And she's like, this is normal, okay? And it was so, and she wrote a letter to us and like, thank you so much, because it was, so easy to transition for her. Couple of tips I would say on this. Number one, you can help yourself out by not always having to kind of fight with them about it. If you give them the tools where it's hard for them not to do it, and what I mean by that is you can give them, a giant list of every, basic expression they'll need, and then they have to look for a little verb here and there, or they have to use like a Anglais verb here and there, then like, okay, but like if you actually give them a list of vocabulary words that are like stapled to their notebook, that's really helpful. I'll throw one in the folder for folks.
Great. I have a colleague who actually has a full sheet of paper crammed with all kinds of expressions, and she has them taped to every single desk in the classroom, so that when the kids are sitting there, they don't even have to look for their notebook. They can just have it right there on the desk. And so there's no excuses. It's right there. So it's, again, raising that bar and really making them responsible for it.
Totally. We got another. We engage that. It's right here on our class rubric. We do great.
Yeah. We got another question here about for which levels this would be most appropriate. So the question comes in, what do you do if it's a lower level, that 1, 2? Do you really do that with your higher levels and even up into your AP? Can it be done in a level 1 or a level 2 class?
Yeah, I definitely think it can be. It can be helpful to maybe wait till they have a little more language to do it. But there are definitely things that you could do with a level 1 class. And what I often find with a level 1 class, they're learning so much and stuff that it can be really fun for that, because it gives them automatically stuff to play with in a creative way. So it actually really, I think, would lend itself quite well to a level 1 class. If you're worried about immersion within that, I think while you design the project, you want to do a little reflection on what is some of the language they might need to be able to do the work, and help them with a vocab list for that. And it's tough, but if you really want to be committed to that immersive environment, which we really feel is essential, that's a good way to approach it to help yourself out in terms of helping kids have the tools they need. But I think it really could be very effective for that. Particularly if you're going to try to design. If we're learning the same thing that kids in, like, for instance, we have French 1 here as well, which is the way our program is designed. We have 6th grade, which is like sort of very basic intro. 7th and 8th are basically French 1, and we also have French 1 in 9th grade, which is for 1 year. So most kids from 8th grade to French 2 in 9th grade, but if they're new to it, they'll do French 1. That means that the 7th and 8th graders and the 9th graders, or new language students, sometimes seniors or juniors who are taking a new language, will take French 1. They're learning some of the same stuff, so they can actually develop tools for each other if they're looking to something that would, something that's like an audience or a problem-solving thing. Like what can we create a board game that kids could use to learn a concept or to engage in something? Something that's going to have a product that might be helpful for another class. It can be helpful for that too.
Cool. And then you also talked about sort of the publishing aspect of the PBL, this product that they've now created, and in order to have that authenticity and make the students really have ownership of it, they've got to be able to publish it somewhere. Do you have any recommendations of how they can publish these things or get them out to the audience, to other people to see?
Yeah, a couple things. Depending on how you, depending on what connection you're trying to make. Looking at something like the Hillside Museum example, it would be going to the museum and leading tours, or doing something where you're connecting with a real audience. Another thing you could do, it's challenging because of the language thing, is a very commonplace way to approach this in project-based learning is to do an exhibition night. Schools that are really deeply committed to doing project-based learning, places like High Tech High in San Diego, or some other schools around the country that do it as well, they have exhibition night, and all of these projects get presented. There's a deadline, and kids have to go and present their project and talk about what it is, what it shows, what the learning is, and it can be really intimidating, but at the same time, it's something that everyone's doing. Parents come out, the community comes out, and we do a little bit of that here. I know one of my colleagues, Carrie Van Atten, she teaches middle school science. She has a pie night, which is a Prove It Expo. That's what she calls it. And the parents bake pies, but the kids are actually doing something around science, but the pie thing is just sort of a fun thing they do. And they come out and kids explain their parents about a science concept that they've designed a project around. And it's really cool. Like, it's really, really, really engaging. And it creates a fun cultural experience for people. So another thing that you could do is if you were, if you found ways to kind of get it out into the community, if there are spaces in the community where your school is that you could put up your projects. I don't know if it's an art museum. I don't know if it's a public space where you get permission to display the work where people can come see it. It kind of depends. That can often be easier for other subjects that aren't French, but it's another way that you can approach it too, is getting it out into that.
All right, great. We have another question about at the middle school level. Now, for St. Luke's, you talked about the 7th and 8th. Now, do they also do PBL in the 7th and 8th grade? And do you find that since they do it at 7th and 8th, it's sort of an easier transition once they kind of get up to 9, 10, because they're sort of used to the format?
Yeah, it's something that we do more and more of. I would say we do more of it in middle school than we do in the upper school. It's something that's, where we are in Connecticut is it's a pretty wealthy community. You have very high standards for parents in terms of college admissions, in terms of grades and things like that. It becomes harder and harder to do things where you're carving out significant amount of time to do this kind of work, because kids kind of start to get directed into more traditional type experiences for whatever reason. So I'd say we do the most of it in middle school, and we start to get away from it. Although a lot of us are trying to build that back in, because it really, when you design a really good project, it helps kids think about their learning in a way that's really powerful for them, where they don't feel like they're kind of doing someone's thing, but rather they're like building something on their own. So 7th and 8th grade does a lot. They have a lot more. They feel they have a lot more freedom to kind of build stuff as a grade team. So they kind of carve out time and space for their entire grades to work on things, and they have a culture of doing that. In 9th grade next week, actually, I teach where all 9th graders are going to be out of their classes here. They'll have a full 5 days where they're going to do project-based learning, and that's not about French, but it's actually about a more. So let's see. Each of them, they made a choice of a particular, like, human rights or a problem that exists in the world, or something, a group that they've decided they're interested in learning about. So, for instance, I'm actually going to be leading a group on gun violence and terrorism. And so kids are going to go, they're going to learn about gun violence and terrorism, and they're going to create a product they're going to share, and they're going to propose a community service project for the school around what they learned. So they're going to go interact with people who are professionals in this, and they're going to create something for an expo that we're going to do on Friday of next week, and the kids are going to go and vote on which group they'd like to do, and then we'll do a project, a community service project at the school. This thing is really cool. The challenge is making sure that you can carve out the time to do it. And you might have to talk to your colleagues about that. You might have to talk to your administrators about that. If you do it on the mega level, that stuff that we're doing there is really gold standard PBL. But that's not the end of it. You know, you can do smaller, lowercase PBL and still get great experiences for kids. It's about trying to get as many of those design elements into it, because that really is what the best quality PBL looks like.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And so we had a question about sources for authentic resources. So do you have anything that you use in particular that is your sort of go-to to find something, an interpretive or some sort of interpretive listening or interpretive reading?
Yeah, so a great thing to look for, I'll type it into the chat box here, is if you go on Twitter and look for OthRes, that's Authentic Resources. The AATF Twitter account, which is run by the wonderful Kat Clayton, who's does really tries to do a lot of PBL in her own classroom as well. She does she shares a lot of OthRes resources on the Twitter account. But if you do a search on Twitter for OthRes, you're going to be able to find some cool stuff. So that's a good way to look for stuff. Twitter is a wonderful resource. If you're not on it, I really recommend that you get on it, because you can go in and find stuff that people just kind of throw out into the ether. It's cool. So I recommend it. You don't even have to tweet. You can just go on and steal stuff. It's wonderful.
All right, great. And then we just have a request here for some more ideas of kinds of projects. I don't know if you maybe have that in your folder that we're going to share out with everybody, or maybe just off the top of your head, another project you've done.
Let's see. I did another one where I had kids make a whodunit. They had to write a play for a whodunit, or they had to. That was really fun, and that was really about trying to create something where we had to guess who the murderer was, something like that. That one I don't think it was quite as strong as this other one. Some kids made a video form of that as well. I think it's not coming up with ideas is really about coming up with the right question, and it's not something that it's kind of, I think if you're looking for an authentic experience, you want to think about where that intersection is between the experience you're hoping kids to have in your classroom and where French is in your community. I would think a little bit about what is an authentic cultural experience tied to francophone speakers in your community, and think about what you can do to engage your kids in that. I think that's a good. Museum thing is a good one. I think that's what I'm thinking about trying to do. I haven't done it before, but the idea of creating a product for something in the community that you could then share with them there's a lot of power in that, I think, for the kids. But I think starting with OthRes is another thing that you can take a look at to come up with ideas. I've done ones where I've had kids create games designed for school to learn, a particular concept, or that can be effective. You want to talk with a good thing to talk with a person. Talk with your middle school French teacher if you have a middle school, and saying, okay, what are the needs in your classroom? What are some of the things, the practices, things that kids struggle with, and how can we design something to help them learn it better? Starting with a sticky problem is the best way to go, and I think it's one of the ways in which the one I gave here was not great. I didn't really start with that question.
Yeah, and one of the things.
More.
Yeah, and sometimes I like to also sort of turn it on its head, because so often we focus on French culture or Francophone culture in general. And in order to create that authentic audience, sometimes we have to turn it around and say, well, if you're going to host an exchange student, that exchange student from France is going to be encountering some really strange phenomenon here in the United States. Like, I always give the example of the doggy bag. You go to a restaurant in France. I mean, that's so rare to see. So that becomes one of our PBLs is, you're going to have to create a survival guide based on, American eating habits. And you're going to have to explain and then compare and the form that you use to communicate that information is up to you. But they then have an authentic audience when our exchange students do come from France. And so it's a way to sort of turn it around. You're still looking at French culture and saying, well, I know in France, you tend to have smaller breakfast or no breakfast at all. But here in the United States, on the weekend, we love to have big breakfast. So it's another way, I think, to create the PBL, and even in maybe a middle school classroom, and that way keep it at their level and accessible.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think in designing, that element of design is like, who's your audience? That's so important. And it's a good way to come up with ideas. You can make a connection with a teacher in France. I had someone get in touch with me recently. They're very interested in the presidential election. Not just for political reasons, but because it's very complex. The way that we elect our president is very complicated. And so you could come up with an election guide that explains the electoral college in French for them, or something that might be tied to like a real world question that they might have about American culture, but would get the kids talking about it and creating about it in French. That can be really helpful.
Well, we're coming up on 7 o'clock. I want to thank you again, Evan, for coming and making this presentation. And again, just say to everybody, all of these materials are going to be available on our website. I'm going to put them on the webinar site. And so, yeah, I just want to say thank you once again, everyone, for coming, and also having the patience to come that second time around. We're going to be having our next webinar. Unfortunately, it's already full, but we're going to be looking at Quizlet and how to supercharge it. That's a different way of using it. We know it's a great study tool, but there's actually some fun things that you can do with Quizlet in the classroom and turn it into a really powerful education tool. So once again, I just want to thank everybody for coming, and we'll be in touch. And please be sure to send an email out to us if you have any questions, if you want to share some resources. This is going to be a great way for us across the country to share. And if anyone's interested on collaborating on a PBL, we can start a worksheet on our webinar website, and we can do this starting anytime. I'd love to be able to coordinate and work with someone, who's even on the West Coast there. So that's all for now. I want to thank everyone for joining, and we'll be in touch soon. Merci et à la prochaine fois.
Merci, au revoir.
Merci.